10 years ago, with that person getting reparations, even though they're completely black, well, obviously they didn't experience the systemic oppression and the harms by the government. And so then, no, we wouldn't say that they should be getting the same reparations that black Americans who have had to endure this onslaught for all of this time. So that's who I would say. Logistically, the people who are black would be the people who have identified as black, or like who have identified as black for X amount of time on the census, and who come from a lineage of enslaved people in the United States. I think the idea of just being semantical, because I don't know if it's singular or plural, reparations or reparation, that's so crazy to me. I don't even know why you said that. That made you sound really, again, from the very beginning. Next, the idea that it would just be like pouring trillions of dollars into like the bottom 13%, or to 13% of the population. I don't think that the government should have to pay out a whole bunch of money. That's not what I think reparations should have to be. It doesn't have to be particularly expensive. Yeah, it's really crazy. You're right. I absolutely would not take reparations and go back to Africa. Again, first off, my heritage, my lineage starts here. I'm a black American. Furthermore, black Americans built this freaking country. I know that you wouldn't know that, again, because this is everybody else. Can you stop doing that, Davinsky? Everybody else everybody else always starts to believe that they can always inject themselves into American politics when you are completely uninformed.
Yeah, it's but yeah, it's tough because you don't. Before you do any massive change, you really want to make sure that you know where the funding is going and that you're actually helping the problem and not making it worse. It's sort of a tangent, but I just saw, I think it was California. They spent $56 billion to help fight homelessness, and then they did an audit and they can't account for a single dollar. Who knows where it went? Now I'm not suggesting that the scientific community would do the same thing, but you don't want to spend a bunch of money on these bacteria that break down microplastics only to find that you've made it 10 times worse, because now they've broken them down into nanoplastics, which are even more harmful. So it's best to be prudent.
The scientific community did that when they bought all those balls, like to put over the reservoirs, those plastic like black balls that were supposed to block out the sun, only to discover that it actually wasn't effective and that the science on it was a little bit quacky. So now they're all still there in our reservoir, but they're not actually sure that it's actually like preserving the water. I think the whole goal was supposed to reflect sunlight, so therefore it didn't like cause evaporation. So then there would be less water loss to evaporation, and then it turns out that didn't actually happen. So they sometimes make the same kind of bonehead mistakes. It sounds good on paper.
Yeah, everything from that, which I have heard about that. That to me seems like an honest mistake. Yeah. So you have your honest mistakes all the way to your psycho Elizabeth Holmes lady, just straight up stealing everything, and running scams. Yeah.
Hey, I got another question. You mentioned you're a toxicologist. Are you familiar with you familiar with EDTA?
EDTA? Yeah, that's a coagulant, right?
Yep. Or I thought it was an anticoagulant.
Or yes, it's in the little tubes, to make the blood not come down.
Right. So are you aware of how that relates to the OJ case at all? The OJ Simpson case?
Yeah, because it can only very surface level, because it can make blood look like it hasn't been there or has been there different lengths, because it won't have time to clot up. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So because OJ's DNA was discovered on the crime scene. Whatever. That's a whole nother conversation. But yes, the thing was, what the defense's main argument on why they believed it was planted was because it had so much EDTA in it, which is normally, like what you would have inside of the lab, or in the tubes. And so then when they discover this blood 3 weeks later, and it's like, yes, it's positively identified to OJ, but it also has all of this EDTA. So then that it couldn't have been just like natural blood from the scene. It had to have been from a lab. That's how that became that was like one of the major pushbacks against the blood found at the crime scene. But like very few people ever talk about that.
Now that is weird, because EDTA does not, that doesn't occur in nature. It's also not like going to be found in any medication that a person would take. Um, However, I have seen weird stuff where you're the person in the field, the technician. Okay, you're supposed to collect the blood, and they have a big rack of tubes, and I've seen technicians put the wrong blood in the wrong tube, and then so good example. We get some blood in the lab, and oh god, the blood's really thin. How many blood thinners is this guy on? We need to get him off blood thinners. And a wise doctor will recollect the test and see did maybe the phlebotomist accidentally draw the blood into the lavender tube that has EDTA, and then say, oh shoot, it's supposed to be red, and then just dump it from the lavender into the red tube and then seal it and pretend, because they didn't want to draw the guy again. Yeah, like there's many instances, especially in that trial. There's lots of people doing things improperly, which is why it was such a I mean, we're talking about it decades later. So there it is.
Where do you stand on that trial? Do you think he was guilty, or do you think he's not? Do you feel like he should have been found not guilty, or do you think he did it, or where do you stand?
If I was the king of the world, I would have sent him home and said, look, we'll retrial in a year, and maybe get some people that whole thing was and jurors were obviously feeling certain ways about it. Of course, the science was all crappy and all over the place. There was so many people had so much to gain or lose from it. And that's not really what a case is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about a single person. Did he do something or did he not do something? I would have said no. I would have thrown the case out. And I would have said we'll circle back around on this, and the whole thing should have been thrown out.
What's the benefit of circling around?
You guys can finish this conversation, then we'll jump into the debate.
Yeah.
Just to brief some people that just joined. So the debate tonight is going to be between me and Fanatiq about whether foundational Black Americans should get reparations. So we're going to have a back and forth, and then after we've kind of covered some ground, we'll invite up speakers to, rebuttal or to put in their thoughts. But just finish off your conversation with Al, and then we'll start the debate in a few minutes.
Okay. Yeah. What's the benefit of what do you think is the benefit of like stopping it and then coming back later? Don't you think it'd make it even harder to actually be able to get information? Like, doesn't all that stuff? Yeah. Isn't it harder to track the longer you go?
So I haven't really thought of this, and I did think in like the 10 seconds that Davinsky was talking, and you're probably right. That would probably make it even worse, because now people have a year to. Well, at the end of the day, they declared him to be not guilty, and if there's going to be an error, you want it to be on the side of not guilty, right? It's better for 10 guilty people to go free than one innocent person to be in jail. So I think that the best scenario is the scenario that happened. The waters are muddied further, because then he was trialed in the civil suit, which he lost, which is the whole freaking. Yeah, what a disaster. Yep. So I don't know.
And then they like punished him for that like robbery situation, and then gave him 33 years for that, like as payback for the thing he was acquitted on. So there's that too.
That's insane. No, theft. I mean, do we lock people up for 30 years for theft? Like, what is that, the society we wish to live in, where you get gaffled up? It's like Les Mis, like he got gaffled up for a decade for stealing bread or something. Yeah. It's like that's not. And
then the other 4 people involved in that thing, or maybe it was 5, they all got probation. So it was like probation for one guy, the guy who brought the gun, probation for the guy who who punched the guy in the face, probation for the guy who kicked the door in, and then 33 years for OJ for making the statement, nobody's going anywhere till we get to the bottom of this. It's wild. Like, it was obviously like a miscarriage of justice. They basically were, we're going to punish you because you got away with the Nicole Brown Simpson thing. So we're going to do that. Yeah, it's gross.
Okay, so
and it's a lot of.
Let's we'll come back to this. I think that this is kind of on par with what we're going to be talking about tonight. So to start the debate, I'm going to be debating Fanatiq on whether FBA's Foundational Black Americans should get reparations. This was a impromptu debate. We haven't really planned out too much. Most of my talking points relate specifically, and my introduction relates to these reparations in a slavery context, but this can be expanded upon in discussion to talk about more contemporary events like redlining and things of this nature. So with that being said, Fanatiq, would you like to start the introduction that you've prepared, or would you like me to go first?
I didn't have a prepared introduction because, again, it's just impromptu. But I can open. Basically, the conversation that we're having is about reparations for Black Americans. I tend not to use FBA. I use American Descendants of Slavery. And that would be a lineage-based reparations, and I believe in that. I think the whole idea behind reparations is repair. And so the concept becomes the idea that you have to first be able to acknowledge that there was an injustice in the first place. And not all injustices require repair, but when you find you have a beautifully functioning system, and you find that you've kept a lot of people out of that system, I think if you can see that there's going to be ongoing harm, I would suggest reparations in that type of a situation. That type of situation, and we've done it before. I think it's a pretty effective thing. Obviously, we did it with the Japanese internment camps situation, and so in the same sense, I think there's been ongoing systemic oppression against Black Americans in the form of redlining, in the form of housing discrimination still to this day, in the form of hiring discrimination, the war on drugs, just the way that policing is, the criminal justice system as a whole, when it comes to almost every financial system in the country, there's been some sort of discrimination against Black Americans ongoing. And so then to me, it feels like the government recognizes when it's done something atrocious that it should repair, and they've done it in countless other situations. The Jews got it for the Holocaust. Again, Native Americans have gotten reparations, and obviously Japanese Americans have gotten reparations, as well as so many other things. It's baked into our moral code to right or wrong. So with all of that being said, I don't understand why we would draw the line at Black people and just say, no, but you guys can't.
Okay, so I'll say my introduction, and then Blend, we will have a back and forth with Fanatiq, and then once we've kind of gone through some of the points, and we'll go to speakers, and that will revamp the conversation. So just patiently wait, and I'll let everyone get a chance to speak. So here is my introduction as to why Black Americans should not get reparations, and this is more in the context of slavery, but as I said, it can be expanded upon.
Wait, I'm asking you, please don't though. Again, I asked you from the very beginning, I do not want you to make this thing framed around slavery, because that's the topic that I tend to avoid. Not that I don't believe that we deserve reparations for slavery, but that's not the argument I tend to make, because I feel like it's almost begging the question. There's so many things that are beyond that. So making that
it's more to do with past grievances and whether someone should be able to sue on behalf of someone who was harmed that weren't harmed directly themselves.
But that's exactly why I don't like that argument about slavery, because that's not the argument, and that wouldn't be the argument that I use.
You could also make this argument for more recent phenomena, like people that are born today.
I got you. So then stick to those and don't do slavery.
Well, I want to touch on slavery. We don't have to go into it.
Specifically, I don't want to. I said that before we had this conversation. I said this about a year ago when we were talking about it on on Twitter. I said specifically, I do not want to debate reparations for slavery, that I wanted to debate reparations for systemic oppression. We made that abundantly clear. I've never wavered on that. I've made that abundantly clear from the very beginning. So I don't know why you're trying to go in that direction. I'm asking you specifically not to center the conversation around slavery at all, because I think that is the most nebulous form of
this is part of my introduction.
Why not?
Hang on. This is only about 20% of my introduction. As I said, these points around slavery in the context of my introduction are more broadened to the point where we can talk about these.
Don't do it about slavery. It's
Yeah,
not
but
that hard.
I mean, I've got the introduction written. It's going to be hard just to like chop up bits and pieces of it. Like,
Well,
just give me
okay,
2 minutes to
what,
say
we can. Okay, I got you. So then let's reconvene, and we'll just go ahead. Let's reconvene, and then you can re-prepare. Considering the fact that literally over a year ago, I very clearly told you I didn't want to do this, and if you've still written an introduction specifically aimed at the thing that I specifically told you I don't want to talk about, then that seems really bad faith.
Okay, well, I'll avoid that. But as I said, a lot of this reverts back to this naturally in part of this conversation.
It won't in my conversation because trust me, I don't ever talk about anyone up on the
okay. So I mean, this seems like a point that you can't.
So he's conceding he's conceding one of the biggest points.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it sounds like. Fanatiq, just give me 2 minutes to read it. I guarantee you, most of it's not about slavery.
How about just avoid the slavery altogether? That's what I'm asking you to do. If you're saying you're incapable of doing that, it seems really bad faith, and I don't think we should even have the conversation, buddy.
So, Fanatiq, you're conceding that.
Can I just say something?
Hey, guys. So, okay, I will avoid the slavery just to keep Fanatiq here. I do think that it is a pivotal point that needs to be discussed. Maybe in discussions later we can touch on that. But with that being said, I will try my best to avoid the slavery argument. So logistically, who would get reparations? Logistically, who is black? And this opens up a can of worms. So Vox reports in South Carolina and Louisiana, researchers found that 1 in 20 people who called themselves white had at least 2% African ancestry. And a lot in the South had about 10% of people who identified as white turned out to have African DNA. So this is a significant amount of people that identify as white but have African ancestry. So it brings up the question about how black do you have to be to actually get reparations? So again, do so-called white people with some black ancestry linked, well, I can't say slavery, but do white people with black ancestry get reparations? So my point is that instead of walking through these uncomfortable kind of logistical questions about who is black, who is white, how black do you have to be to get reparations, my argument has always been that people should get reparations based on class rather than based on race, because all poor people are poor, but not all black people are poor. So if we had a class-based reparations for people that are currently poor, this wouldn't isolate, say, poor Koreans, poor white people, poor Hispanics in America from the conversation. Just from a kind of a sense of logic, why would you want to isolate millions of people that would be in favor of some class-based reparations by making it racially exclusive, right? So my point is that if you had a class-based reparation system, this would disproportionately benefit black people anyway. It would disproportionately benefit other minorities because they are disproportionately poor. But it wouldn't have the negative of isolating, say, poor white people. I don't really think it's fair that a poor white person in Alabama should be forgotten in the conversation when it comes to reparations, because what is the worst kind of social structure to be in, or the social category? It's being poor. I think it's kind of patronizing that some wealthy guy from Beverly Hills, you know, or some son of a lawyer or a son of an engineer who happens to be black should get some kind of monetary reward from the government when there's people in much worse, circumstances, living in trailer parks, living in the, the kind of the blue collar belt of America where there's opioid crisis. So, I mean, I guess that's one of my arguments about reparations. Another one would be, I don't think that you can sue on behalf of an ancestor's kind of troubles that they went through, right? So compensations for the harm done to you. We all have ancestors that were discriminated against, that were treated in unethical ways. I mean, you can look at those early 1900 videos of just white people in New York, child laborers, chimney sweepers. What about those people that worked on construction sites with very poor works, like safety. So I just don't think it's fair to have a reparations done for the grievances of your ancestors when that hasn't directly caused you harm. I also think that it's kind of nonsensical to talk about generational wealth that dates back hundreds of years. Because if you look at studies, they show that intergenerational wealth tends to dissipate within 3 generations. So this whole idea that white Americans are the beneficiaries of, say, people from 200 years ago or more recently, it just doesn't really work out like that way when you look at how wealth is lost through generations. So I mean, I haven't touched on slavery there, so go ahead, Fanatiq.
Okay, so I'm glad you got your introduction. We both did ours, so now we can do more of a back and forth. And I feel like you said a lot, so I'm going to try to address all of them, but I have to do one. We have to go one by one. All right, so for the first question you asked was logistically who would get reparations and logistically who is Black. I think it would be up for other people, maybe some experts to decide. But obviously, as I said, reparations would be lineage based, and I would say that the reparations, depending on on the harm that was caused, would be for the people who are harmed. So, for example, when the Japanese, like the people who got put into internment camps and lost their homes and lost their jobs and lost their businesses, those people got reparations, and it made sense because that's what happened.
Yeah, you never lost a business or so.
Hang on, Fanatiq. Sorry, Blend. We're gonna have about a 10-minute back and forth, and then we'll open up the conversation. Go ahead,
but that's
Fanatiq.
not. I thought you and I were going to have a debate, and when we concluded, I thought I said that at the very beginning. You and I were going to have a debate, and when we concluded our debate, any interjections or questions that any people wanted to have, I'd be willing to discuss that with them afterwards.
We'll have a debate on reparations. You're debating, you're not even debating really reparations. This is what happens when you debate a liberal. He's talking about.
Blend. We did agree upon this. So just let Fanatiq. We're gonna have a back and forth. So just let Fanatiq speak. I did make you co-host, Fanatiq, but you didn't accept. So as you have co-host abilities, you can just mute the crowd. So I don't know if you want to accept co-host. That's up to you. Anyone who speaks out of turn, we will open up the space, but anyone who opens their mic or speaks out of turn until we've concluded this discussion, I'm going to have to remove you to listener and then I'll bring you back up. So go ahead, Fanatiq.
I think it might be more effectively if we just make everyone listener now, and then you and I are there, and when we're ready for everyone else to come there, then we'll be able to have the conversation, as opposed to having people helping people have the self-control to just do something that we could just fix ourselves right now. Why don't we just make ourselves the only two speakers until we're ready for other people to be involved?
Go ahead, I'll remove them.
All right. Yeah. So the first thing that you said was about, logistically who would get reparations. And again, reparations would be for the people who were harmed. You would have to be able to trace that harm pretty specifically. For like I mentioned, for the Japanese in internment camps, those individuals, they lost their businesses, they lost their homes. Some of them, they were treated really, really unfairly and improperly based off of just some prejudice that was completely unfounded. And then we determined, hey, we as a government should right that wrong. And so we ended up paying them out. I think somewhere close to like... it
was $10,000 adjusted.
Was it 10,000? Yeah, we paid them, $10,000, right? So then in that case, it makes sense to, one, help people who have been in the country to remain patriotic, it's a good faith restorative effort, and I think that makes sense. So I would say, in the same sense, when it comes to Black Americans, I would say the people who have been harmed would be the ones that would get reparations. And the reason, so then, for example, if you have, some Nigerian person who comes from, who migrates here 10 years ago, would that person be getting reparations even though they're completely Black? Well, obviously they didn't experience the systemic oppression and the harms by the government. And so then, no, we wouldn't say that they should be getting the same reparations that Black Americans who have had to endure this onslaught for all of this time. So That's who I would say. Logistically, the people who are black would be the people who have identified as black, or like who have identified as black for X amount of time on the census, and who come from a lineage of enslaved people in the United States.
How significant does that lineage have to be? I mean, there was that white woman who claimed black for decades. I forget her name. Who?
Rachel Dolezal?
Yeah, her. Well, like, would she get reparations? She's claimed black. She's changed her phenotypes to have more of a black appearance. Would she deserve reparations? What if she has 2% ancestry linking her? Many Americans do. 10% of white Southerners have linkage to, these foundational black Americans that came over as slavery. If she has a percentage of that ancestry linked to that, and if she claims black, would she get reparations under your bill? And this is the thing: is that it opens up this can of worms that is logistically impossible. Again, you talked about.
Let me answer your question then. So no, first off, Rachel Dolezal would not, because Rachel Dolezal is not black. Rachel Dolezal lied and said she was black, and then she also, when she didn't get a specific scholarship, she actually sued and said, hey, they discriminated against me because I'm white. So she was white when it was beneficial, when she needed that lawsuit for that scholarship, and then she was black when it was beneficial, when she wanted the social gains that came from that. So no, I don't think, one, she was not actually black. Two, regarding the idea of a lineage, like that's directly traced to a specific harm, Rachel Dolezal didn't receive any specific harms for being black. That didn't happen, and she didn't have that lineage because her parents were both white.
But where does the lineage start? And this is why I wanted to center the conversation about slavery, because that's where most foundational black Americans trace their earliest lineage.
Please don't. And again, the lineage starts when you can say whatever the race-based harm that was caused. Because right now, what we're discussing.
So the Irish people that were also.
Let me answer. So what we're discussing right now is race-based reparations. And so if we're discussing race-based reparations, right, for specifically black Americans, then you would look and see what specific discriminations have black Americans endured.
Yeah, but hang on, Fanatiq, when you talked about the Japanese internment camps, the Japanese in general didn't just get money from the government. Those were Japanese that were about 20% of the population of Japanese in America that got compensation because they actually went to the internment camp. So there's a direct harm done to them. That was within their lifespan. So it wasn't just Japanese with the American government and every Japanese person got some harm. So this is what I'm saying.
That's not what I'm suggesting either. I'm suggesting a lineage-based reparations for the harms that were directly done by those lineages. So, for example, yes, for the Japanese in the internment camps, some of the people who were directly in the internment camps didn't actually get it. Some of their children did, because some of them weren't living at the time when the reparations were paid out. People don't often know this, but those reparations weren't paid out for 40 years. And so after 40 years, you have to assume that some of those people died, but their children still got those reparations that was owed to them, right? So in the same sense, I would say, because someone dies yesterday, I'm not going to, if I don't know, someone's parent was to die yesterday, it's not like, oh, well, there goes any of the harms that happened directly to them, that you're no longer, that those things won't be paid out. Like that, I just don't think it works that way. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. And regarding the 2% thing, yes, I mean, obviously you can find the vast majority of people on the planet have that 2% or 1% black, all of those kind of things, because life began in Africa. The DNA goes back, the very first human beings were African. So yes, that can be found, but that doesn't mean that because you had that 1 or 2% DNA that was black, that you encountered any of the discrimination and things that happened at the hands of the U.S. government. So then if that's the case, then no, you wouldn't just get reparations because you have that 2%. You would need to be of a lineage that encountered the race-based discrimination at the hands of the U.S. government.
You're viewing lineage as a monolith. You're viewing black Americans as if they've had monolithic experiences. Not every Black American went through redlining. Not every Black American went through, whatever racial discrimination. Like, so if you want to talk about lineage based, you shouldn't be looking at an entire race and just and this is why the Japanese argument falls apart. Hang on, let me finish, because you've spoken for quite some time. So when you looked at the Japanese question about reparations, those were on behalf of the people that were actually in internment camps, or their children from the parents that were in internment camps. They weren't suing on the Japanese people, the million or so, how many Japanese people didn't all get reparations. It was based on the compensation of that specific event. So if you wanted to have a compensation based on redlining, you'd also have to include many Irish, Italian, Jewish communities. And this is why it just gets to the point of ridiculousness, because every single group of people, and no group has a monolithic experience, but every single group of people can trace some kind of harm on the individual level. Even the WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant in America, they can go back some generations and they can find, hey, maybe one of my ancestors, they were robbed at some point in time, or they were mistreated, or, these kind of past laws that applied to them were unjust. So what I'm saying is that to go down and sue on behalf of ancestors is ridiculous. What we should be looking at is the contemporary standing of people in the society. And if the contemporary standard is that, hey, these people are poor, let's help them based on them being poor today, not on what some ancestor, not what some ancestor went through 50 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago. But I think that a lot of this conversation comes from wealthy Blacks in America that are rather privileged, but have had a good upbringing, and they kind of just want a handout from the government when they don't deserve it.
It feels like you don't actually want to debate because you're making so many arguments. It feels like a gish gallop because I can't even address them. You can say that I'm long-winded, but my long-windedness is normally around one central point. I'm not going to make 5 different arguments and then expect somebody to be able to contend with all of them.
It was a broad argument based around one point. Is that you can't sue on behalf of grievances of an ancestor.
Hold on, what's happening here? Because I stopped and let you go, so now let me go.
Yeah, but this isn't an interview, Fanatiq. I'm making a point of saying you can't.
Stop and let me go. Are we having a conversation or not?
Yeah, but it obviously went over your head. What I'm saying is very simple.
Now stop and let me go. So the point,
Fanatiq, I can break it down for you, because if you didn't understand, it's very simple.
What I need you to do, I need you to stop and let me go, like I stopped and let you go. That's what I need you to do, and what I need you to do.
Yeah, but I'm trying to explain to you, because you seem to have been lost on that.
I don't need an explanation. I'm going to go ahead and address the things that you're saying.
It wasn't a gish gallop. It's just that you can't comprehend a nuanced point.
I won't yell if you don't talk over me. Please stop interrupting me and let me address the many points that you made.
There was a singular point. It's that you can't sue on past grievances of an ancestor, because every single person has ancestors that have past grievances.
It sounds like you're not really capable of having a conversation. Do you want to have a conversation or not? Because it seems like right now, when you were talking, I stopped talking to let you finish at your request. Now I'm repeatedly telling you to let me go in response, and you're not letting me do that.
I was just trying to explain, because it seems to have gone over.
Hold on, you're doing it again. So it seems like you're not capable of having a conversation.
It seems like you're black-splaining to me.
Okay, you can say whatever the freak you want to. Again, it seems like you're not capable of having a conversation. And I don't know, maybe you're not, but I'm asking you to go ahead and get some decorum, get some decency, and when I make an appeal for you to stop and let me finish, that you do that for me like I did for you. Is that something that you're capable of or not?
Yeah, I was just explaining the point.
So then let's do that. Okay, good. Now, the thing that you said earlier was I did not mention race exclusively. I mentioned lineage, and I even delineated the idea that there would be people who are of the same race, like a Nigerian immigrant, who would not get the same lineage-based reparations. So again, to strawman me and misconstrue what I'm saying into, it's just a blanket thing with race, is inaccurate, number one. Number two, what I also explained was, another thing that you said that was absolutely incorrect. You said that, not all Black people were redlined. Redlining was a governmental policy, and I understand if you're not completely familiar with what redlining is, and that's how you can make such an erroneous statement. Redlining was a governmental policy that applied across the board. During the time when redlining was in effect, it had 2 different components. It was the insurance of the loans, which were done by the Federal Housing Administration, which is a government entity, that they were insuring loans and they were restricting the purchases of homes and things in these redlined areas. So black people, they refuse to insure a single loan to a single black person. So we can say across the board, not a single black person living in America had access to those FHA secured loans until we eventually passed the Fair Housing Act in 1967. And it still continued after that in some ways, like surreptitiously. But the fact of the matter was, we can say any black person living in the country during that time did not have access to those loans. So all black people were restricted. All black people.
Redlining was based on economic zones. It wasn't based on racial zones.
Okay, and I'm sorry if you're uninformed yet again, but the government has been very clear about this. There is no denial whatsoever. It had nothing to do with economics. It was 100% purely based on race. And furthermore, literally, the FHA specifically said they would not insure the loans of black people, which is why not a single black person, wealthy or impoverished alike, ever got access to those FHA loans during that department. It was not based on class, it was based on race.
Okay, so no, this is incorrect. The redlining was based on economic zones, and it was kind of to do with the risk of default for, say, for home ownership, something similar that's happened during the 2009 financial crash of the housing market, except in reverse. So this is why it wasn't, hang on. Now you're not letting me finish. How ironic. Okay.
I haven't said a word. I never said a word. What are you talking about?
You just cutting me off. I just heard you talking.
I never said a word. What are you talking about?
Well, I heard you, so maybe.
I did not say a word. It's recorded. I did not say a word. What are you talking about?
Well, I heard you, so.
You did not.
Yeah, to go back to the conversation, these weren't racially exclusive. There were many Irish, there was many Italian, there were many Jewish communities that were redlined because they lived in poorer economic zones. Not every black person was redlined because they were in wealthier, affluent neighborhoods that weren't in the redline district. So again, if you're going to go down a lineage base, you can't view black Americans as this monolith with all of these past grievances as if it's a collective. There were plenty of black Americans that have had affluent lives, that continue to have affluent lives today. And so you can't sue on behalf of, an overrepresentation of black Americans that were redlined. I would agree with that. But not every black American was redlined. So again, if we're going to go from past grievances, we can't do that because every single person alive today has an ancestor that was, wronged in some kind of way by society or the legal system or whatever it may be. So every single person shouldn't be able to sue on behalf of my great-grandfather for, being, a child laborer and maybe getting his arm chopped off in a workplace accident. In hindsight, because we say, well, it's immoral today. So what I say in response is that, again, we should look at the contemporary standings of people, not what their ancestors went through, but what they are going through today. And you can't tell me that blacks have this monolithic experience in the USA of being like oppressed today when, there's plenty of black affluent people within America that live in these nice communities. And I just don't think it's fair that they should get some kind of handout from the government when there are plenty of poor whites and plenty of non-black minorities within the USA that are in actual, economic hardships.
Okay, so first off, look, this is exactly why I think it's really difficult for other people to get involved in the reparations conversation. And I can understand why you would have the position that you don't really support reparations if you're largely uninformed about the specific harms that have happened to us. And so then you don't understand. Again, this is U.S. history, and I can understand why you would be ignorant about the actual process of redlining. But to state it very firmly and very clearly, I'm not going to argue with you any further on this point, but definitely redlining were lines that were drawn literally specifically on race. Furthermore, the FHA literally had a governmental policy that said specifically they would not insure the loans of African Americans, of black people in this country. Point blank period. You cannot name a single black person who had access to any of those FHA loans that were insured during that time. So it was not just an economic policy. You can get the last word if you want to on that. You are wrong, which is why you should probably leave this conversation to Americans who actually study U.S. history. Then going on to the idea about if there should be class-based reparations versus direct reparations for lineage-based reparations. If you're doing class-based quote-unquote reparations, it doesn't sound a lot like reparations. It just sounds like maybe some social safety net, socialistic program to like help offset damages or poor people so that they can become better, thriving members of society. And I'm all for that. That's not what reparations is, because obviously with reparations, it's very much the root word. It is based on the word repair. And when you would say in order to repair something, something has to have been damaged. And normally when you're talking about reparations, you're going to be talking about intentional damage. The government intentionally subjugated black people in various ways in this country. And so because of that reparations would be that. Now, if you want to talk about class-based help, I'm for that. That would be a different and distinct thing. Poor white people do need special programs in order to help them. That's why we have things like TANF, temporary assistance for needy families. That's why we have things like Social Security. That's why we have things like Medicare or Medi-Cal, or depending on whatever state-based medical system that you have. That's why we have vouchers and other things like that, and free education within the country. That's why we have the Pell Grant. So there's all of these things meant to help impoverished people, and I'm with all of those programs. However, some of the damage that has been done by the government, specifically around redlining and home ownership, has negatively impacted black people.
Hang on, let me ask you, do you think that redlining just...
Let me finish.
You're just wrong, because I just fact-checked you. Okay, I got you.
I got you. Hey, guess what? Guess what, though? Guess what? If I'm wrong, you're going to let me finish talking and then tell me if I'm wrong, you're going to let me finish talking and then tell me I'm wrong when I'm done, like I did for you. So anyway, what I do believe is that the government should, now I've lost my train of thought. Please don't do that in the future. Be respectful the way I was for you. You've been wrong. You've been wrong. And while you were wrong, I chose to wait until you finish before
what you accused me of being wrong, I was right about.
I'm asking you to do the same thing. Now, hopefully I can regain my train of thought. Please, if you actually want a decent conversation, have a little bit more decency. So the point that I was making was that obviously, dang it, when you have I've lost my train of thought. I'm asking you not to do that again, because if that keeps happening, I don't think we can continue a conversation. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll fact check you real quick. So during the mid-20th century, the FHA engaged in practices that specifically discriminated against Black Americans and other ethnic minorities. That included Irish, Italian, and Jewish communities. So redlining wasn't racially specific. It was an economically zoned area. This is what redlining was. And again, you want to sue on behalf of redlining? Okay, what would be the compensation there? I mean, how far do you have to go back to sue on behalf of a wrong? And this is where I think, do you really think that some rich black from Silicon Valley that earns $200,000 a year, that had an ancestor that was redlined, or had an ancestor that was enslaved, or had an ancestor that went through some discrimination, should get money from the government? I just think that's ridiculous. I think it's going to create racial animosity within America and in the world, because now people are feeling like you are getting a handout when there are people in far worse situations than a rich black guy programmer earning $200,000 a year. Shouldn't some white kid or a Mexican kid or a Korean kid that's actually impoverished get some, shouldn't that money go to them, people actually in need, not just someone who thinks they're a victim?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there can be plenty of things that can be done for repair for people who are victims, right? If we're talking about reparations. Now, I already addressed the idea about the idea of social programs and things like that meant to help people who are in need. I think, we have the highest GDP of any country in the world. We produce more than literally any other country in the world. So I don't understand why we wouldn't be able to use some of that wealth to help some of the people who are needy. So I mean that makes all the sense in the world to me. And again, I'm not going to address what you said about redlining because you're just wrong about that. So we're going to move past that thing. The other thing that you said is what you said. Why would we ignore white people in the conversation about reparations? I do think that there are conversations that can be had about reparations for white people that would be a distinct thing from what we are talking about, right? That would be a distinct thing from the reparations that are lineage based on the forms of systemic oppression that I'm talking about.
What do you mean by lineage based? So can you expand on what you mean? What lineage are you talking about?
I would say Black people who are descendants of slavery, who have
I thought
that.
we're avoiding the slavery conversation.
I'm not talking about slavery itself. I'm not talking about reparations for slavery. I'm saying that the descendants of slavery are a specific lineage.
Well, what about those lineages? So there were people that, they're obviously Black people that have been in the upper echelons of society for hundreds of years, right? There are elite Black families. Should they get reparations? Like, it's just, you didn't answer my question before either. Should a Black man in Silicon Valley that earns $200,000 a year, that had an ancestor that was redlined or an ancestor that was wronged in some way, should he get compensation from the government?
Sure. So, let me answer your question. So yes, I do believe that if that person can trace harm that happened directly from the government, then yeah, he should get reparations. And then the other thing that you asked way earlier was, how far back do we need to go? And for me, it's not very far at all. You see, we can look at it this way. My mother, who is alive today, she just inherited the house from my grandmother, who passed in 2019. That's 5 years ago. Okay, the house that my grandmother purchased was in South Los Angeles, because at the time of the purchase, Black people were not allowed to buy homes in the richer parts of, like Beverly Hills, Woodland Hills, West Hills, etc. So because of that, she had to buy a house in South Los Angeles. Those houses obviously didn't mature or appreciate in value at the same rate as the houses of equal size and whatever in those white neighborhoods that they were restricted from. That meant that when my grandmother left the house to my mother and her siblings, that her inheritance was directly impacted because of the racist legislation that was in place at the time of her purchasing that home. So for my mother, she can look at the harm that happened to her in her inheritance literally 5 years ago. So it's not even 5 years, 4.5, but yeah, my point, yeah, about 5 years ago. So I would say that we can see all of the vestiges and things that have happened due to redlining and the housing discrimination and things that have impacted Black Americans like to this day. So I would say we don't have to go that far back. I can look as far as my mother.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. You actually changed my mind. I think we need reparations, but we need to we need to have compensation for the real victims, and they're not like Blacks in America. Even the bottom 5% of Americans are richer than the top 5% of Indians. So how about we pay reparations to the global South that we live off the exploitation of? You know, you're sitting there in a comfy chair with your headphones on, made from cheap Chinese labor in a sweatshop. How are you, as someone from the global South, a very privileged man, going to complain about reparations? You are literally the product of an injustice system. You understand that, Fanatiq? You're sitting there preaching about reparations. How about we give those reparations to the global South, which we exploit for our inflated lifestyle? Would you agree with that?
I would not agree with that, and I think it's pretty ridiculous, and here's why. I think you can look at fairness and balance regardless of your circumstances. An impoverished person can still, a person with very limited resources can still be unfair to the people who are beneath him. And a person with incredibly high resources can be unfair to someone that's beneath him. So a good analogy would be, say you have let me finish, please. So a good analogy would be, say you have someone like, Bill Gates, who's worth, multiple $1 billion. And then he decides that he's going to be unfair to one of his children, and maybe one of his children he leaves all of his inheritance, and maybe the other children he didn't leave any inheritance. So even though they have all that wealth, and maybe those kids are still privileged and went to the best school, etc., you can still see that harm. When I'm talking about reparations, again, I'm talking about reparations specifically from the U.S. government, that the people that the U.S. government is beholden to its people. right? And so when the U.S. government does wrong by its people and violates its principles and its constitution, if it wants to continue to claim its morality and it wants to do the right thing, then it should do reparations. Now, extending the conversation to something extraneous like Indian people or anyone else, I mean, that's a totally different conversation that has nothing to do with the conversation about reparations.
Yeah, but like, what if it's trying to...
Let me finish. And I would also say...
And then I want to bring up some speakers.
Well, okay, then we can end the conversation, and I'll just address their things, and that will be done. So what I'm saying is, I believe that because the government is beholden to its people, that we have every right to ask the government, to demand of the government, in fairness, to right its wrong because of the discrimination that is done to us. I think comparing us to third world countries or other people, it doesn't make any sense. When we're talking about the framing of the conversation and the government that would be responsible, the government is responsible to its people, and they're the ones that harmed us. So that's it.
Well, the Chinese man will say, "Oh, this black man here sitting on his iPhone, but I'm in the sweatshop." And then you got the African saying that he was in the coal bait mines. And then he's just listening to this conversation. He's like, "Hey, I'm actually in the coal bait mines right now." And this guy's talking about how he needs reparations because his grandmother couldn't buy a house in a certain neighborhood. Do you see like the kind of the irony there? So we need to have reparations based on an actual needs basis. And this is why we should have class-based reparations rather than this racially exclusive based reparations. Would you mind if we bring up some speakers? We've got some requests. You also can respond. You'll have like due process. So can we bring up some speakers, Fanatiq?
Okay, yeah. But before we do that, there's a few other things that you had said in your opening monologue that I feel like need to be addressed. For one, you said white people in New York are people in bad working conditions. Like all of those people should get reparations. And to be honest with you, those wouldn't be reparations. Again, when you have intentional harms done by the U.S. government and their recognition of the needs of the people and their choice to go ahead and benefit white Americans and all of that, I think it makes all the sense in the world that we should be able to say, you guys should be held accountable for that and you should repair.
What do you mean by you people?
The government. I'm talking about the government.
You're a bit racist there, Fanatiq.
See, I feel like you're not engaging in good faith anymore because you're getting embarrassed in this debate, and that's fine. You can do that. The other thing is,
I'm playing you out in this debate.
Fine. No, it's good. I got you. The other thing is, you said we shouldn't talk about generational wealth, and generational wealth is obviously relevant. Like, there's all of the statistics that clearly demonstrate that people who come from wealthy children tend to have better outcomes. Obviously, in this country, wealthy people, their property taxes pay for their education, so they have better educational outcomes. They're far less likely to be engaged in criminal activity. They're far less subject to environmental damages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously, intergenerational wealth is incredibly beneficial. So I don't know why you would say something to the contrary there. So we knew that. Then the last thing.
This is why I want class-based reparations.
Well, the last thing that you said was you can't sue for harms against your ancestors. And I think that that's also kind of absurd. I look at things like, for example, the GI Bill. And I think we obviously understood the benefits of the GI Bill and the need for the GI Bill. Stated it incredibly briefly, it's the idea that when we send people off to war, it's a very valiant thing that they can do to fight for their country. And we recognize that. However, that by being in that situation, fighting in that war, they're not going to get a lot of skills in most cases that translate to civilian society living. So the government decided that while their peers who did not fight in the war, or their counterparts who did not fight in the war, were still going to school while their freedoms were being protected, they were still starting businesses and getting work experience, that we needed to create some sort of thing that would allow the people who fought in the war benefits so that they can re-assimilate into society, which is why we came up with the GI Bill, which gave free education and really assisted people with the purchases of their home by lowering interest rates and lowering required down payments and so on and so forth. We understood that benefit. So then if we decide, well, this is a benefit that we needed, and then we just restricted it from Black people, then it seems like those people would be harmed. And then the children of those people who were restricted from the GI Bill, they went on to have lower educational outcomes, lower, higher crime rates, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can see that the wealth literally impacted them that they were restricted from by not having access to the GI Bill. I would say any person living today who had a parent who fought in the war and who was restricted and unfairly discriminated against with that GI Bill, I would say any of those people should be able to sue the government in order to get access to the GI Bill and in order to get the benefits that would have been associated with that. That makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, so I think that, as we've said before, is that, I mean, you talked about economics, and obviously, yeah, the more opportunities you have, the access to, nutrition, better schooling, blah, 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 the better your life outcomes. But you also have to understand that your existence as an American, as someone from the global South, is based on the exploitation of someone from the global South, rather, you being in the global North. So if we're going to talk about reparations, I think that we need to broaden the conversation and look at who's most affected by the current system, right? And if you're going to take some kind of moral argument, I just think it's kind of rich that someone from the global North is asking for reparations off a government that exploits the global South. But with that being said, I do want to bring up Blend and Herman. So
wait. Hold on, let me respond to that really quickly. Just to be clear, I think it's also absurd to sit there and restrict it shows a lack of good faith when you're willing to entertain the notion of reparations, meaning you understand that when harm is being done, it should be repaired, but simultaneously to say, no, but I just don't want it for Black people, even though there is literally studied and tested and proven harms that have been done to Black people.
I want it for poor people, and that would disproportionately benefit Blacks anyway.
Lastly, I think the idea of broadening a conversation to extraneous things doesn't actually accomplish anything. You can deal with I'm not saying that those other things can't be addressed. I'm not studied enough on like the exploitation of the global South to have that conversation, but that could be a conversation. It doesn't negate the conversation that we're having.
But would you also be...
In other words, if I'm sitting here and I'm having a conversation about, I don't know, maybe some discrimination or some sexual harassment done by, I don't know, a manager at some company to some woman, I think going and talking about broader about just like the sexual exploitation of women in general doesn't do anything to solve that person's individual problem. Right now, the thing that we're discussing is reparations for Black Americans for systemic oppression. Your need to deviate and obfuscate and broaden it to other extraneous things indicates that you're not able to really contend with the ideas that I'm presenting, which is why you're doing such a tactic. But anyways, if you can bring up whoever you need to.
No. So my idea is simple. It's that we should have class-based reparations, which should disproportionately benefit Blacks because they are disproportionately poor. And like this would stop a lot of the kind of racial aspect that would divide the nation behind that. But let's go ahead to Blend.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. Wasn't much of a debate. There wasn't much framework. You conceded slavery is not a point. That's a major point for many grievances, and that has flaws. But more broadly, the only example you could give was that you feel like you're due something through an inheritance, and I think you also contradict yourself when you recognize that you're not entitled legally to your grandmother or your mother. Your mother wasn't legally entitled to the estate of your grandmother. Your grandmother could have given that to whoever she wanted to. So that's point one that kills that argument. Like there's just like an entitlement in your voice. I think you're looking for a handout, to be honest, and you're looking for something that's going to get your handout with blinders on. That's just my commentary, unless you could be a little more broader. But the other thing is the grievances. You speak of grievances. Now there's a time sensitive to a grievance. There's limitations. There's limitations to grievances. Something called usually statute. Okay, let me speak. Yeah, usually there's statute limitations on a grievance.
To be clear,
usually there's statute. Okay, we can rebuttal and go back and forth on that. But usually there's statute limitations on a grievance. So, I think you brought up, the '60s, and in my mind, the reparations was when FHA did change the law. So that's a form of reparations. Maybe they could go a little further if you could identify something where they could go a little further. It's hard to go on a lineage base, like I said, for point one, because you're not entitled to your ancestors' property. They can donate the estate to whoever they want to. So you have no entitlement there. So from that standpoint, it's just entitlement. That's point one. Point two is it's time sensitive. So if your grandmother didn't sue on her own behalf and it didn't affect you directly, then you may be barred, and it may be her failure to speak up or maybe she negotiated a deal where she said it would be all right if we just changed the FHA laws, change the FHA laws. So that's the deal she bargained. So you can't go back and unpack the deal she bargained, especially in civil rights. There was an opportunity to speak up, and the people that were more reasonable than the younger generation, which I think is much softer. I think when they went through the civil rights, I think what they did is they recognized the fair thing to do was to just give everyone a level playing field. And what we're seeing now is a failure of a certain society to assimilate and do anything with that level playing field. So now it's all reaction victimhood based because of that failure. And you brought up certain things last time.
Yo, you got to wrap it up, bro. You're just going on, and I'm not going to even address what you're saying. So you got to wrap it up pretty quick because we got to get to the next person.
Okay, and finally is chicken and egg. So you brought up things like poverty and rich people. So people that are criminals are less likely to obtain wealth, such chicken and egg. That's a much broader discussion. But again, point one, it's you're not owed anything inherently, and so your argument fails there. You conceded multiple points, you failed there, and you failed to address the time-sensitive issue and think that, again, because you feel entitled to something that happened, just the fact you feel entitled to something that happened to your grandmother just really speaks to your mindset and why Da Vinci washed you.
Okay, I hear you. All right, so the next person, who was the other person I wanted to say something?
But I think that's a very good point, actually. I just want to give a quick
No,
commentary on what
we're not doing that. Hey, I told him.
We're both. Hang on.
So we can end the conversation now. I said specifically, if he gish galloped, I wasn't going to address
He
him.
wasn't gish galloping. He made a good point. You aren't entitled to your grandmother's house.
And I'm not going to endure a dog pile. So we can go to the next person, or we can be done. I'm not going to entertain that guy, and I don't want you to dog pile and try to reaffirm what he said. We're moving to the next point.
Well said, Glenn. Go ahead, Herman.
You got washed though. You had no entitlement to your grandma's house. That's a problem.
Go ahead. Can you remove Glenn now so we can get to the next speaker, or no?
So this is Herman. Thank you, Glenn. I think you actually made several good points. Like my issue is with the entire idea of reparations. It's not real. It's just something to argue over. And my first reason is very pedantic. Like reparations, is it a singular noun or is it a plural? Like that alone says to me we're not talking about anything real. But the argument for reparations. There is no political argument for delivering trillions of dollars to 13% of the population. Like, there's no political argument for convincing the 50 plus 1% of the U.S. population to do that while there remains millions in poverty. There's something about the idea that people are so concerned, about a debt being paid, that it be named reparations rather than focusing on how the debt is paid.
Okay, Kate, so let's address what things that you said so far, right? Okay, so I would say that obviously I would look at it and I would think about it from the perspective that one, I think the idea of just being semantical, because I don't know if it's singular or plural, reparations or reparation, that's so crazy to me. I don't even know why you said that. That made you sound really ignorant from the very beginning. Next, the idea that it would just be pouring trillions of dollars into the bottom 13% to 13% of the population. I don't think that the government should have to pay out a whole bunch of money. That's not what I think reparations should have to be. It doesn't have to be particularly expensive. I mean, I think obviously even things like what they did with the New Deal, right? When they did the FHA loans, it wasn't that the government was just paying out insane amounts of money to people. What the government did was they insured loans. They said, these loans will be given. These are the interest rates that are required in order to give those loans, and we'll insure them in case they don't. In case if they end up defaulting, then we'll be the insurance for that. But upon a defaulted property, they then inherit the property, which they can.
My brother, you're not actually addressing what I said.
What I was saying was, what I was saying was, then if you end up the default.
Let me ask you a direct question, please.
Hold on. I'm addressing the thing. I need you to wait, and I'm addressing the thing that you were saying about pouring $13 million. I mean, pouring.
So when I say something with nuance,
you
it's
mentioned
galloping, but when you do it, you're
it's not dish galloping. He mentioned a lot, and I'm addressing the thing directly.
You're not addressing any. Actually, no. So if you're going
here, he said, Davinsky, he said that he didn't believe in paying trillions of dollars, and so what I'm explaining to him, right, is that I'm saying that we would not be paying trillions of dollars, because what we would end up doing is, if we end up doing something like insuring a loan, then you're not just paying a bunch of money. At that point, you're just insuring it, and it doesn't cost you anything. When in the case of a default for a property, the government can then assume that property that was defaulted and then sell that property for its value, and then they didn't lose anything.
Did that answer your question or your statement, Herman?
That addresses
no, of course not. Okay, so let me ask you. So actually, instead of interrupting me, let me fucking finish my points and then ask you a direct question. So, like, again, like the fact that you're going back to focusing on the past, there is no political argument in this current moment for anything, and you can sort of say that insurance isn't money. Let me finish. Insurance is money. Anything that you do in terms of reparations is money. And there is no argument right now for delivering, I don't care if it's millions or billions or trillions, there is no argument for restructuring our current economic system for 13% of the population. And the issue...
Okay, so I'll address that. It's not about restructuring the current system. It's not about restructuring the system. It's about injecting cash into people who have been directly harmed by a system, and that would actually be a great solution. And again, you can say insurance is money, but it wouldn't immediately raise immediately raise the debt. They don't have to pay the money out. They're only insuring if, in the case of default, it's just like me right now, it'd be like me right now. If I decided to insure someone and say, hey, if you have an accident, then I will be responsible. If I haven't done that, then I haven't done that. I'm not paying that out until the accident happens.
Jesus fucking Christ, you're incredibly intellectually dishonest.
Hang on, Herman. So we'll come back to you. I want to go to Arrow and then Trust. Go ahead, Al, sorry.
Wait, I'm sorry. One last thing, please, if I can. The idea that there's not any argument right now, right, for reparations. I think I've provided plenty of succinct ones. The idea...
Herman, we'll come back to you. Just let Fanatiq go, and then we're going to Al.
Okay, thank you. The idea is, yes, we obviously recognize that there are plenty of situations in which we've done reparations in the past, and we understand the benefit of it. If you help the most impoverished in the country, those people become, one, higher contributing members of society, such that there's less crime, and they're also able to contribute in other ways, and they're able to increase productivity within the country, which would literally drive up the GDP, right? And so I think that is obviously what would be one of the benefits. The second one is, we live in the greatest country in the world, but when you have such a sin, and you have all of these things that are causing people to be dejected and to not really resonate with the country in the same way, this would be a restorative effort, a restorative measure to fix that. That was literally the motivation behind the reparations for the Japanese. It was that if we want to maintain Japan as an ally, if we want to be able to morally impose some of our opinions and things on the rest of the world, then we have to be able to say that this wrong was wrong, right that wrong, which is what a repair is, because of the damage done to those people. And then that creates patriotism. It allows people to actually assimilate better into the society, and you actually fix the injustice that was originally done. But if you're ignorant about the justice that was originally done, then you don't even see a reason to repair it. And that's why you're in the situation you're in.
So just before we go to Al, I do want to touch on something. So yeah, I mean, no real country, if you look at the racial or ethnic tolerance index, America ranks in like the top 20 of the world. So no one's really pointing at America with any like empirical data to show that Black Americans or ethnic minorities are discriminated You know, you see a lot of these FBAs, and they stand for Free Palestine, right? Well, what about the Afro-Palestinians that are referred to, or the Afro-Yemeni that are referred to as al-Akdam, which translates to slave? This whole idea that America has some moral sin that isn't, every country in the world has had slavery, it's had ethnic groups that have been previously oppressed. We have righted those wrongs by, electing black officials, by having the Civil Rights Bill, by having all of these kind of, these grievances righted already. So it's just, I don't see how, you talk about economics, you talk about, well, yeah, you give money to poorer people, you give them better access to education, nutrition, blah, blah, blah. And that goes back to my original point, is that if you're going to have a fair, racial, inclusive policy, you would have something like reparations based on class rather than race, which would disproportionately benefit poor black people, because poor black people are disproportionately poor. So it's just like, I don't know, it seems like you come from a wealthy family and you want something knowing that you wouldn't get it in a class-based system. So that's what I wanted to say there. Let's go to Al.
No. Let me address what you said before we go to the next person. I don't come from a wealthy family. Yeah, my family's doing particularly well now, but they earned their way up there. They were not wealthy. They were impoverished. I was raised in abject poverty.
The system has been working for you.
Let me finish. My parents went on to become upper middle class people. They're retired now, but that doesn't stop the poverty that they came from. My dad had to drink from blacks only family and from blacks only fountains, and was heavily impoverished.
Did you want to cosplay the oppression they went through?
I'm going to finish my point, and then I'm going to go ahead and go on to the other things that you were saying. Please stop doing that. So yeah, the other thing I got to remember now. I got to go back to it so that I can remember, because you keep doing that and making me lose my train of thought. So my dad did drink from from blacks only fountains. My family stopped doing that. My family was not wealthy from the very beginning. So the point, can you stop doing that? I don't think you're capable of decency. That's why, whatever. So I'm going to repeat it.
You got your reparations.
My family did not come from wealth. And so to even point to the fact that we succeeded based off of the miracles and the God that we served that created these opportunities, then I don't think that that's indication of a fair system per se. I think that's indication of some people working extra hard in order to overcome that. Another thing that you said, that you guys have been saying, multiple people have said this, simply making things fair now isn't righting a wrong. A good analogy for this is if I went and I continue to siphon money out of your bank account, and so I keep taking money and or stealing your credit card and spending it and maxing it out until now you're $50,000 in debt. At which point I then say, what I've been doing, stealing money from you, is wrong, and I'll never do it again. So sure, from this point on, I'll never steal from you. But that debt that I created, the damages, you still have to repair those yourself. Then at that point, that wouldn't be reparations. Creating a fair system, creating an equal system after damage has been done is not actual reparations. Reparations means to fix and repair the damage done. Simply making it fair does not repair that, as I pointed out.
So it seems like you're trying to cosplay the oppression of some ancestors. Like, you couldn't drink from a water fountain, your dad did. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Can we go to Al, though? Go ahead, Al.
I guess the thing, my thing is
Hey, Al, one more thing. I'm sorry. Hey, Dr. Vinci. So considering you're saying that I'm trying to assume the oppression of my ancestors, my dad's still living today. Should he get reparations for the fountain?
Yeah, he should be able to sue on behalf. I don't know what damages you could sue from drinking from a different water fountain, but hey, if there's some monetary damages that you can calculate, then go ahead, sue for that. But you can't.
Okay. And likewise with my mother, when it came to the housing discrimination and things that she faced, should she be able to sue for those things too?
Sure, but you shouldn't be able to. As Blend eloquently said before, you're not entitled to your grandmother's house. She could have left it to charity. Who are you to say that, hey, I should get that house? You know, my auntie should have inherited her house, she thinks, but her mother gave it to a cat foundation. So there you go. You're not entitled to the wealth of your ancestor.
I'd never said that you're entitled to the wealth of your ancestors, but we do know that typically the wealth of people's ancestors is left to their children. And if the person does decide to do so, then that person would then inherit all harm and damages caused to that individual. So for example, in the case of my grandmother, she did choose, right, because it was her choice, she chose to leave that house to her children. And so therefore the children inherit any damages that were associated with the purchase of that home, and the purchase of that home was obviously based on discrimination, which is why she had to buy it in that neighborhood, which is why I didn't appreciate the same value. So then my mother would be able to sue for that, for the damages caused by that. So those are reparations, and those policies weren't by banks, it wasn't by individuals, that was by policies, by the government. So then those people should be able to sue the states that enforced it, the local governments that enforced it, and of course the federal government for the things that it enforced that they received damages from. We do inherit some of those damages, and those would be the things that we would be able to sue for. And if my mother left that house to me, then I should be able to sue for it.
Can I rebut real quick? No, because it was my point.
Hang on, I want to go to Al. We do have like a lot of speakers, but we will circle back to you. Go ahead, Al, and then we'll go to Uber, Trust.
I'll make it
Al,
quick.
Trust, and then Uber.
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? Say we come up with the package deal, right? And it's a miracle. Everyone agrees it's going to be X amount of dollars. It goes to this amount of people. Boom, reparations. It's amazing. Everyone's happy. And what's to stop a year later when 10% of the people blow it, like they will in any subset of the population? Some people are wasteful. From them coming back and then saying we want a second round. Because then we've just spent a whole bunch of money and we haven't solved the problem because now there's still unhappy people. Like how could we guarantee there's not going to be people coming back to the table with the handout? That's my main concern. Is not the initial spending. It's having to then spend again and again and again.
Okay, that's a good question, Al. And I would say that what in good faith, what you have to do is you have to right the wrong that you did. And if a person feels that it's not, but you can agree that it is enough. But once you've done the appropriate amount to offset that damage, you're no longer obligated. So for instance, if I stole $20 from someone and then they were able to say, and I felt bad, and then it's like, hey, you owe me $20. I know you stole that money, and I give you back the $20, and you say, you know what? No, I want more money. It's like, no, I gave you back what I owed you. That's the end of it. We're done with this discussion, right? And I think the only problem that I have with what you're suggesting here is that it's like almost like it's like a purity test. If this thing won't 100% fix every single issue, then it's not good enough. And I think we obviously know that doesn't work. There are always going to be outliers in any group of people, no matter what. I think the smartest thing to do, as opposed to saying, because there will be some people that still won't reap that benefit, I think that we shouldn't do it at all. I think the smart thing is to say, this is the right thing to do. It will fix the vast majority of the issue, and we do everything we can to make sure that it is as effective as possible for the largest group of people, and we move forward with that.
How much would you want, Fanatiq? How much would you want?
If I can finish, a good example of this, there's that one recent show that just like that got that's good, like kind of doing really well right now, where they were doing like a prison reform within a group of people, where they said, we're taking out the guards, we're going to restore your humanity, we're going to let you guys police yourselves, and they did that, and they got incredible results. Violence plummeted. People were involved in a lot more therapy. There's just so many benefits that came from it, but some bad apples were still so terrible that they could not be helped, and those people had to be removed from the system. And so for some people, they're not going to take to it, no matter how good it is, no matter what you're doing. Those individuals.
We get your point, Fanatiq. How much do you want?
Those individuals should not be used to dismiss the benefits for the vast majority of people and for the country and for the GDP as a whole. There will always be outliers. Now you can ask whatever question you want.
How much
that kind of goes to my point, though.
My point is not about how much money. I would think what we would need is like an economist to study these things and figure it out. The areas that I do want are the same exact areas that the government already used to recognize that they would create an entire class of people who were able to ascend to middle class and upper middle class white people after the New Deal. Those areas were housing, education,
So those black people in Appalachia. You talk too much, Fanatiq. This isn't the Fanatiq show. Let me speak. Let me speak.
You asked me a question. Do you want an answer or not?
Yeah, I want to know a figure. What do you want? You want $1 million? You want $10 million? What do you want?
So I'm answering the question you asked me. The question you asked me.
Yeah,
was,
belittles the whole thing, though. It's not.
The question you asked me was, how much do I want? And so now I'm explaining to you. It's not a specific figure what I want. And now I'm on mute. Just stop being rude and I'll answer your question. I am answering it directly. Instead of it being about a physical figure, you want help in the specific areas, like that would literally transcend, which is what the government has already done. Those areas are education, housing, and jobs. And I would probably say healthcare because of all the healthcare.
Yeah. And that would, if you did that for poor people, it would disproportionately benefit black people without excluding other racial people.
If you want me to answer your question, those things don't cost an insane amount of money, because what you can do is, like I said, for the housing, you do vouchers, right? You do vouchers, you do interest-free loans for houses, and so
just for black people.
Just for the people who were damaged. And there are other people, for example, like you said, Irish Americans who were discriminated at some point. And when they can trace those discriminations to harm, and they can show the economic differences caused by those harms, then those people should be repaired too. And it's separate.
Okay, so in your reparations bill, you want to include the Irish.
It's so crazy. So I said something separate and distinct claim, because obviously you are going to have to delineate which.
Yeah, this is my point. Hang on, okay, I've got your.
You can't keep interjecting, bro.
I've heard your argument. I've heard it.
No. I don't need you to do any of that. What I need you to do is, when you ask me a question and I begin responding to your question, to one, not interject, and two, if you interject, to let me respond to your interjection fully as I planned to do. Now, what I was saying was, I do believe there should be a distinction. Obviously, Irish Americans and Mexican Americans, Chinese Americans, all of them can probably trace their own harms. Native Americans can trace the harms that have happened to them from the U.S. government. And notice, the Native American reparations doesn't stop, impede, or impact my reparations. It shouldn't. And likewise, my reparations for my people shouldn't stop, impede, or impact anyone else's reparations. If they have a distinct claim that they can prove, then they can make those claims. I'm specifically talking about reparations for Black Americans, which is, I thought, what we were all discussing. And you asked me the very question about how much money. And again, I think an interest-free loan in housing, it doesn't cost a lot of money, because guess what? And when we're doing that, we pay back those loans, so you're not actually losing in those senses. And you get to claim those properties if someone was to default on that loan, and then you can sell it for that property. So it shouldn't cost you a whole bunch of money, and almost no money. And what it'll do is boost the GDP, boost the productivity, and we all benefit as a result of that. Same with education, same when it comes to like jobs. When you train people, when you help people to elevate in that way, those people do better for you and your country. Crime rates decline. You don't have as many, situations where you don't have to fund as many police, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to make a statement, and this isn't a question or a statement to you, Fanatiq, because I know you like to ramble. So this is just a statement. You don't have to address it in like a 10-minute parable.
It will be addressed. Go ahead.
Okay, so this isn't a question or a statement to you. This is just a statement for the audience. So instead of having 1,000 different claims from like women or for disabled people or for the elderly or for whatever marginalized group, whatever ethnic group has some past grievance that they can trace their harm to, there wasn't a ramp at this shopping center and I couldn't go to this shopping center and this shopping center was cheaper for produce, so I had to go to a more, it's just ridiculous. Like, we can't have all of these different reparations bills based on some past grievance going through the courts. This is logistically impossible. It's just such I'm not done, Fanatiq. I wasn't talking to you. So
I haven't said a word.
Well, can you mute yourself? Because I can hear background noise. Yeah, I'll mute you. Just mute your mic. So yeah, when it comes to like past grievances or like different groups having some claim for reparations because they have some perceived wrong, it's just ridiculous. We need to look at people that are actually disenfranchised right now, and those are poor people. Those are people from lower socioeconomic communities. And as I said, if you just concentrate purely on this group of people that clearly need some help, you would disproportionately benefit Black Americans because they are disproportionately poor. And you wouldn't have to go through all of these logistical fucking hurdles about, well, you know, red lighting here, you got to calculate the damages there, you know, oh, there's 5,000 back here when my grandma couldn't buy the house. Like, instead of doing like this mathematical or like racial fucking minefield, you can just be like, hey, these people earn under $20,000 a year. Let's help them by maybe subsidizing their education, by giving them tax breaks, and that would uplift those that class-based section of the population without having to do all of these minefields that you have to just walk through. It's just such an inefficient way to kind of improve society, is having a system like this, or Black-only lines. Well, maybe the Irish have a claim. Now you have, you have loads for Irish people. Well, maybe the Italians get a claim. Maybe the Japanese, the Chinese, the Eskimos get a claim. How about we just look at people that are actually disenfranchised, i.e. poor people, and we help them without all of this racial nonsense? That's my statement.
Okay.
I don't know. Hang on, Fanatiq, that wasn't a question. That wasn't a statement.
It was a statement that was in direct response to what I said. We're not about
No. This was nothing to do with you.
I'm going to respond anyway. You made a statement in this conversation, and I'm going to respond.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with you. This is open to the audience. This isn't the Fanatiq show. This isn't the Fanatiq show.
It isn't. But you made a statement. Do you want me to? Are we actually engaging or not?
Yeah, I'm engaging with the audience.
Good. I'm going to engage. So be quiet and let me respond.
No. I want to go to Al.
So if I'm not about to be dogpiled, and this is a conversation about reparations, it is a dogpile because now
this was a statement. This was a statement.
Do you want me here or not?
Yes, but I just
okay. Then I'm going to respond. It's that simple. Do you want me to respond and be here, or do you not want me to respond and want me to leave?
Was that a statement for you, Al?
I don't care. You have a choice right now. Which one do you want to make, buddy?
Okay, you can say your 10-minute.
Thank you. Okay, I appreciate I appreciate it. Thank you. So the point is, one, you keep lying because I never ever said anything about it being Black specific. I didn't. I did specifically mention lineage.
I didn't lie because I didn't say you. I didn't say you. I wasn't talking to you. I was talking in general senses for that.
The reason.
You think everything's about you.
The reason these things are distinct is because, as I said earlier, you have like Nigerian people who would be Black, but would not be entitled to the lineage-based reparations for American descendants of slaves. It would be lineage-based. So that's already one. And then the other thing that you said, which is absolutely crazy, right? And this is how we know that you're being bad faith and disingenuous. You're trying to say it would be logistically unsound to deal with each individual issue, as if it wouldn't be more logistically complicated to try to lump all forms of reparation into one. So now we're going to have to figure out what exactly.
That'd be a lot easier to help more people versus helping different groups.
So now we're going to have to try to figure out. It's crazy how you can't stop interrupting. So now we're gonna have to try to figure out.
It's crazy, but you think every statement's for you,
So now we're gonna have to try to figure out what would be the reparations that we would be doing for, I don't know, whatever women's issues. What was the harm directly tied to the stuff that happened to other groups? And then while we're already trying to figure out what
why do you have to go back and find harm? Why can't you look at the harm that people are going through today? Why do you have to go back? Why can't you look at the contemporary populations for that?
What we're actually dealing with.
Can you answer that question? Can you answer that question?
What we're actually talking about.
That's actually a direct question.
So it's crazy because you're not letting me respond to the thing that you said. So what we're what we're actually talking about when we're talking about the harms that happen specifically to Black Americans, for example, in housing. So then we have to figure out economically what was that damage and how much do we calculate in compensation or reparation.
Why can't we just look at the contemporary populations right now? Why do we have to go back to past harm?
So in the same sense, if that's already going to be complicated enough, as you tried to imply earlier, and then we're going to also have to try to figure out all the other various discriminations that happen in education and all those things. So we're going to have to figure out all of those things to then start lumping in completely extreme.
We don't have to go. We don't have to go back in time. We can look at contemporary populations today.
So then to try to lump in all these extraneous claims like the Irish or all of these other people like, I don't know, Chinese Americans and all of these other things, it obviously seems like what ends up happening.
What about left-handed people? I'm left-handed. Do I get reparations? Can I have my reparations bill?
It gets way more logistically complicated. So you're either lying to me or you're lying to
No,
you.
it's not. It's very simple to say poor people get reparations, then left-handed people and disabled people get reparations, and blacks and Eskimos get reparations, and you have thousands of different bills. That's way more complicated. You're being dishonest.
You're either lying to me or you're lying to you when your claim is that you want something that's more logistically sound, because obviously dealing with more things as opposed to individually focusing is going to be
so having one bill based on class is more logistically difficult than having a bill for left-handed people, a bill for Asians, a bill for Eskimos, a bill for fucking elderly. That's more. Come on, dude, you're being willfully ignorant. Let's let Al finish, and then I want to go to Trust and then Uber.
Hey, we're going to let Al go. Stop interrupting me like that. Just stop.
Shut up.
Stop interrupting me like that if you want to actually...
He's interrupting because you talk so fucking much. Stop talking and stop interrupting. God damn.
Next time, don't interrupt me the entire time.
It'd go a lot faster if you didn't think every statement was
it would go a lot faster if you don't interrupt me. Stop doing it.
This isn't Fanatiq, this isn't an interview. It's an open mic debate.
I know it's an open mic discussion in which we're going to be decent, or else there's no point in even being here. How can
let somebody else
talk over me? Next time, while I'm talking, shut up like I did for you.
You're always talking. Why don't you let someone else talk?
While I speak.
Okay, I want to bring order to this room, okay? Fanatiq, I will let you speak. I've let you speak. I didn't want you to address that. I wanted to move the conversation along, but you have to address every little thing that someone says.
I sure do. Yep, you're right, because it's a conversation about reparations, and I'm here for it. And if I was going to be here, brought forward conversation of reparations, then I'm going to address the things about reparations. I specifically told you that I was more than comfortable, because once we were, I specifically
told you. He can't stop talking. He doesn't have to do
it. Just quickly, Fanatiq.
But you're still interjecting, so then of course I'm going to respond. If you don't want something to be responded to, then don't directly respond to what I said. I know that you know you were addressing what I said in your thing, and so I needed to address it again. Stop.
Fanatiq, so my Chinese boyfriend wants to talk to you. He's got a question for you, okay? Can you talk to my Chinese boyfriend?
Okay, so we had Al. Where's Al? Is he going or not?
Fanatiq, why do you think the black man gets the reparations when you on the iPhone? I make the iPhone in the sweatshop, Fanatiq. You give me reparations, your perfect black man. That was my Chinese boyfriend. Let's go to Al.
Dang, it's crazy, bro. You're getting embarrassed, and you're resorting to such crazy stuff. This should be embarrassing for you, but I don't even think you're aware enough to be embarrassed. Go ahead.
He's matching your absurdity. He's matching your absurdity. What he's doing. Yeah, let fucking Al.
Go ahead. Can I have a chat? Any chance anyone else having a chat?
No, it was Al. Al had something to say, didn't
he? Yeah, so, okay.
No, we already went over it.
It was Al, and then it was, I think Trust is gone, so we'll go to Uber. So, Al, if you're done with your statement, we'll go to Uber. Go ahead, Uber. Uber, you're up. Okay, Uber's dropped out. Let's go to let's go to Robbie and then Chris, and then we'll go to Ezekiel.
Lovely. I'd just like to briefly say something uninterrupted, if I could. My mother's Irish, so can I seek reparations for the Barbary pilots that raided the Irish coast? Can I seek reparations for the Irish that transported to Australia and to America? My father's English. Can I seek reparations for the Italians that raided and took slaves? Can I seek reparations for the Vikings that raided and took slaves? Can I seek reparations for all of those problems that have gone down the line? I finished paying for the ending slavery from my taxes in 2016. The country borrowed so much money, England, to stop slavery that we didn't pay it back until 2016. Will the black people be paying me back for the money I've spent to free the slaves? Yeah. How about we stop walking around with a chip on our shoulder? We stop harking back to the sins of our father, because I will not be held responsible for the sins of my father. How about we deal with the here and now? And if you want reparations, spend that money on the poor today, not on your new sneakers, Fanatiq, because you've got a chip on your shoulder. At the end of the day, it's quite simple. Yeah, the money now should be spent on those that are needy now. That's what civilized society would do, not on some dreamed up nonsensical idea of reparations. reparations from the past. And finally, if you get a penny in reparations because your people were taken from Africa, then you take those reparations and you fuck off back to Africa. But you won't, because you want all the benefits
Send
of
all
a
you
Western
white
world,
immigrants
but
back
you want
home.
the money free.
Send all white.
All right. So just to be clear, yeah, it's really crazy. You're right. I absolutely would not take reparations and go back to Africa. Again, first off, my heritage, my lineage starts here. I'm a Black American. Furthermore, Black Americans built this freaking country. I know that you wouldn't know that, again, because this is everybody else. Can you stop doing that, Davinsky? Everybody else everybody else always starts to believe that they can always inject themselves into American politics when you are completely uninformed. Again, I'm not talking about some crazy far off harms that were done to ancestors. I'm talking about things that are impacting people living today. There are people who didn't get the GI Bill who are living today. The housing discrimination that happens, not happened, was today. Literally, a big old study was just done where Navy Federal, the bank, the credit union that I bank with, Navy Federal has lending discrimination practices regardless of credit score. I have 820 credit score. So the fact was, even still with that 820 credit score, they still were giving me higher interest on the loans that I was trying to get, even though I'm in like the top 5 percentile of credit scores in the country.
Then sue them. Sue them. Great. Sue them. Yeah, do sue them. That's what we're saying. Sue them.
Yes, I as an individual could try to sue a bank, right? And it would be really ridiculous. But the fact of the matter is the discrimination is still ongoing against Black Americans to this day. So with that being said, we do have justice claims. We have impacts that have happened to us that are living today. And that's the stuff that we will be talking about. Now, when you're asking the questions about all of those other absurd things, well, can I sue this person, this person? I'm not informed.
May I please on this as an American?
When
you say you don't have anybody who knows the history.
I say, when you ask me those questions, can you sue? I'm sorry, I have to mute you. Please don't interrupt while I'm talking. When you say, can you sue for all of those things? I have the decency and the self-awareness to recognize I'm not informed enough about Irish history, so I wouldn't have a claim one way or the other. What I'm talking about are the things that I'm informed about, the things that impact me, the things that I've chosen to study, the things that can be proven, which are economic damages done to Black people living today within this country by the government that owes to its people. That's my claim. Now, if you got some other extraneous claims,
Fanatiq. So
can I please on this?
Hang on, Ezekiel. Uber was next. He dropped out. Then we'll go to you. But Fanatiq, can you please keep your responses to like a minute? Because otherwise the chat gets very, it gets people leave. So like I want you to respond, but can you just make your points a little bit more concise?
The arguments that they're making aren't confined to 1 minute, so I'm going to talk as much as I need to in order to address all the nonsense that they're saying. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Uber. And can you mute your mic, Fanatiq? There's a bit of echo. Go ahead, Uber. And then Ezekiel. And then we'll go to Chris. And then Blend. And then Sense. But if you don't address your question to Fanatiq, then hopefully he won't respond for 10 minutes. So just try to make it a general statement.
Yeah, that was double mute. Can you hear me, Davinsky? Am I clear? Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So really quickly, the argument with the Japanese is actually a little bit bad faith, because the Japanese people were paid reparations based off of what just happened to them. It wasn't like something that happened and the people that were involved had died and then they were arguing for reparations. It literally happened to them, and then they just and the reparations were paid to only those that were put in the camps and that were affected. The argument wasn't about Japanese people, it was just paid to the individuals who happen to be Japanese.
Okay, Uber.
Just one second. Let me just land. Allow me land my then the Japanese argument is bad faith. You don't have to bring it up because it doesn't align with the narrative you are trying to sell out. Second point is if you open the doors to reparations, then there could be a problem with
wait, hold on, Uber. I would rather you not gish gallop. let me just address the first point that you make, and then you can go on to make
You're
your second
misusing
point.
Gish Gallop. There's no Gish Gallop there. He's making 2 points. Let him
Right,
finish
and
his
rather,
point.
right. I don't think you know what Gish Gallop means, but it's fine. I'm gonna address the first point that you made already, and then otherwise.
Fanatiq.
If he
Okay,
Gish
This
Gallop,
is fucking child.
Fanatiq.
if he Gish Gallop, I'm not gonna address your point. Go ahead.
Fanatiq, you're using your first world privilege. Uber is literally in the global south, making your.
I don't care. I don't care about any of that. Uber, if you want me to address what you're saying, you can let me address your first point, or I'm just not going to address any point you make.
This is fucking childish.
Fanatiq, you're Americans explaining to Uber. Okay, I think the least you can do to Uber, since he made your iPhone, is let him speak. So Uber, finish your point.
And I'm telling you, if you want me to address you, you're going to let me address your first point, and then you can make your second point, or I'm not going to address you.
You're coming from a real place of privilege right now, Fanatiq. You know that, yeah? This is disgusting.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Uber. You make your choice. Would you rather address your first point, or would you rather I just don't address you at all?
Any longer. What a gobshite. He just goes on and talks over everyone. And then he accuses other people of a Gish Gallop. What a clown. What a clown.
Let Uber just.
May I please, as the American in the fucking room, have a point at this? I've been waiting for over 2 hours to fucking do this. No, hang on, man. It's been 2 fucking hours, David. 2 hours.
Yeah, no, okay. Well, fuck, what am I meant to do? Fanatiq's co-host, he's got to leave. He seems very sensitive. Uber, please just finish your second point. Let Fanatiq respond, and then we'll go to Ezekiel.
Yeah, so the reason I made the first point, obviously, is because it's being weaponized as precedent for why there should be reparations in the Black American context. But then it's not an accurate example, because the Japanese people were paid, when they were still alive. So bringing up that point to say, oh look, people have been paid reparations, is actually bad faith, and it doesn't help anyone support your cause. Then the second point I did want to make was, if we validate reparations in this context, then we are going to open the doors to the other kind of I would say reparations, which is if people are being subjugated like today, for example, or people are being oppressed today, can we argue for the continued oppression of those people? Like, let's say you want to free people in the next 200 years. Can we say because people were oppressed 200 years before, can we argue that they continue to remain oppressed? Because like whoever was oppressing them before, like I don't like the slave owners before, like can't we also argue for slave owners before that they should have continued owning their slaves? And like if you open this door, then you open the doors to so many other bullshit and bad ideas, because then people can just go up in the future, and if you have enough people that are bad enough, they can argue and say, okay, well, you can't abolish something today because it was promised to us, like the slave owners from 200 years ago promised that we would continue to own slaves for the next 1,000 years. So what's the incentive to free the slaves today when we still have 800 years more to own the slaves? And they bring up the document that this was what they said 200 years ago. So this argument doesn't just work one way. It can also work two ways. It can be used from the other people, not just from the people. It's not just like from the aggrieved. It can also be used from people that are doing the oppressing to make an argument for. That's why you have to focus on the present, which is if something is happening now, then just deal with it. Like leave what happened in the past. It's bad ideas, parasitic thinking. Doesn't make any sense. I land my plane there.
Okay, so I don't need to address anything you were talking about because that was just a crazy Gish Gallop. Anyone else wanted to go?
Okay, yeah, as the American, I gotta say something here. First and foremost, I've categorically kept notes with this. I'm gonna start with the early one, the Japanese got reparations. Okay, so did Jewish Americans. Okay, well, as a family who is descendant from people who died in that Holocaust, do you know how much reparations the Jewish Americans got? My great-grandfather got $6. $6. Lost his wife, 2 children, 3 brothers, and a fucking sister. He got $6. This is what you want to do? Okay, this is what you want to do? Redline. Never been racially. To this day, the Supreme Court has 1,748 decisions on redlining that all state unequivocally it is based purely on economic factors, and even during the height of Jim Crow never saw racial segregation. Because guess what you had in Wisconsin? German Americans redlined from the Polish because they couldn't stop fighting with each other. You had Italians redlined from the Slavs because they couldn't stop fighting. It happened all over the place. Let's go with another thing.
No. We're not going to Gish Gallop. Let me address the things that you've said so far, and then we can go ahead and go on, right? Okay. So, yeah, what I'll say is...
Dude, I don't want to have a conversation.
Oh, then why are you talking? Then get out already.
No, because I want to make my statement.
No, you already made your statement, and so I'm not gonna just be lectured to. We're going to even have a conversation. I said I would be willing to address people's comments. If you just wanted to come on here and do a lecture, I'm good.
But Fanatiq, this isn't an interview. This is an open discussion. We had our little debate.
He's got commentary. He's giving commentary on the debate. He's allowed to give commentary. The debate happened.
Hey, Davinsky, you just made the statement. Hey, this is not a it's not an interview, it's a discussion. But when he's making a statement, I don't want a discussion, then this is not a discussion. So then he shouldn't be included. Thank you for that. You're right. It is supposed to be a discussion. And when someone wants to lecture me but doesn't want to actually have interaction, it's not a discussion.
He's not lecturing you, though. He's making a general statement.
Okay, but then if he wants to make just statements in the middle of our discussion that aren't supposed to be interacted with, then it's not worth our time. So we can go next now. But I'm going to first address the things that he already said, and then we'll go to the next person. So yeah, first off, the idea that other people were redlined. I understand, again, if you're ignorant about what redlining means. No, other people were not redlined. No, there was no thing where the Poland were redlined against the Germany. Redlining refers very specifically to the FHA drawing maps, them and the HLOC, right? And them drawing maps and literally specifically circling black neighborhoods and saying we will not invest in these neighborhoods, and the concomitant policy that said we will not loan or insure the loans for Black Americans. That's what redlining is. Now, I'm saying there was discrimination and segregation might be the word you were looking for, and it's okay, I'll help you with your vocabulary. There was segregation and separation. Maybe that might have existed between the Germans and other people in other areas, but they weren't redlined. The whole reason why redlining is so important is because it is a claim against the U.S. government for the governmental policy and their intentional discrimination and harm of Black Americans. That's what redlining is. Next person, please.
Okay, so we'll go to Blend because he's got privilege because he.
I want to finish my statement and then we can have a back and forth, dude. That's what it means. Like, I'm not trying to discuss it point by point. Let me finish my statement and I'll have a back and forth with you. Quit muting like a petulant fucking child. Let other people talk.
I got you. Here, listen. I don't want to be gish galloped, and I don't want somebody to just go and I don't. Maybe I understand some of you guys don't know what a gish gallop is. A gish gallop is when you make several weak arguments back to back, so then someone can't contend with all of the arguments for volume's sake and not because of the merit of any individual argument. I don't want to deal with that. So you can make an argument and I'll deal with that argument, and then you can go on to make your next
argument. I'll tell you how Twitter Spaces work, because you're new to these. You're used to Discord debates. In Twitter Spaces, people can speak usually for as long as they want, especially if they've been waiting for 20 minutes, half an hour, an hour to say their piece. And then if it's hard for you to remember more than one point, then you can get notepads and you can write down some arguments. This is how Twitter Spaces work universally. And so like you're coming into a space where you're not really familiar with, and you are acting out of the norm when it comes to this kind of platform. So I do want to have more of a, like, not everything is also directed to you. People have been listening to this conversation for 2 hours, right? They're just saying their general thoughts. A lot of these comments I could be like, oh, well, they're talking to me because I mentioned a point, they're talking about that point, but I let it go. I let them say their piece and we move on to the next person. There's still people like Chris and Sans and Blend hasn't spoken in like an hour. So we got to be mindful that this isn't the Fanatiq show. It's an open discussion now. We've had our debate. So just let people speak and let's just stop the lecturing. So Ezekiel,
just to be clear, I don't want lectures. What I want is meaningful engagement. And
let me take my point and quit lecturing.
Here's my point, Davinsky, in response to what you just said. Yeah, so what it is look, I'm involved in a conversation about reparations, which I know there's a lot of misinformation that gets out there, and a lot of people are intentionally going to try to misconstrue things and put stuff into the ether. If I'm going to upload this content to my channel, if I'm going to be doing that, then that means that I need to make sure that everything is addressed so that more misinformation doesn't get spread. So the only way that I'm going to be able to do that is to address things point by point. And unfortunately, I get that you're saying that that's how spaces work. I've been in plenty of spaces. I've been in spaces literally over a year now. So they don't have to work in any other given way. And if I'm going to be part of something that I actually want to waste my energy on, then it's going to be had with a little bit more decorum and a little bit more decency. And decency says to not gish gallop a person and just throw up a whole bunch of terrible arguments. So they can adjust. Let me address your points if you actually want a discussion, and I'm not going to endure a lecture from those who are less informed than me. I won't be doing it. So you have a
this is a very egotistical way to like
it
frame
is,
like everyone in this space is just like ignorant, and you're like the fucking bearer of truth. Come on, dude. This is ridiculous. Stop with the muting. Let's have an open discussion, because you're acting like you want decorum. Fanatic. I'll say this: you're acting like a sassy little bitch right now. So can we please just let Ezekiel finish his point? Let's go to an open mic and let's have some back and forth.
I want back and forth, but we can't have back and forth with gish gallops. That's exactly my point.
Dude, please let me say my point, for fuck's sake. Stop muting the room. It's fucking ridiculous.
Then let me address
so the point, dude, please stop. Just stop. Just close your mouth for 5 minutes.
I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. I will address each of your individual points, and if you don't want me to do that, then don't speak. It's that simple. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Do you know the landmark case of redlining? It's Mueller versus D.C. The Mueller versus the District Court of Columbia, First District Court. Do you know what that fucking Supreme Court decision? That is the landmark case in redlining. What was the decision? Come on, let's see how informed you really are, Google smart boy.
I don't know it by title, but you go ahead and inform me, buddy.
Okay, so the Mueller versus D.C. in the First District Courts of Appeals clearly stated that though redlining can be seen through the lens of implicit bias on racial segregation, as a matter of policy, the Department of Health and Human Services and the HUD Department, as it was established in '82, have always put economic factors first and foremost. For you saying that you disagree just off the phonetics of what the Supreme Court is saying, while a legal basis, you are wrong in your definition by every color of the law, every stretch of the imagination, and every definition of the word in every single Black's Law dictionary from 1st to 6th edition. You are wrong, and you're lecturing all of us like we're uninformed, uneducated simpletons, and you're coming off like an egotistical fucking cunt.
Okay, I appreciate that. So what I'm reading right now, when I see Mueller versus D.C., it says that it was a unanimous ruling of a 3-judge panel of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals turned aside arguments that Mueller wielded so much power as a special prosecutor that he should have been nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate.
You're referring to...
What are you talking about? Yeah, what were you
You're not
about?
even looking at the right case. You're looking at the special prosecutor Mueller with Trump. You don't even know what the fuck to look up. I just gave you the court docket.
What you're talking about, bro. You lost.
Get off the stage. You lost. Hey, cancel him. Debate over. You lost. When you're Googling on a debate, you've lost.
You pulled up the special prosecutor, not the red line.
That's really crazy. So I got it. So apparently, if I don't know literally every Supreme Court decision, suddenly that makes me a person.
Oh, you were calling us all uneducated. How the fuck's it feel, you clown?
Yeah, no, you are obviously uninformed.
You just cited the fucking FBI director case.
Hey, you're obviously...
You're an idiot. You just cited the director FBI.
You're obviously uninformed if you genuinely believe that redlining was not something that was done based on race. You're obviously uninformed. That's not my opinion. That's something I know.
No. So, I mean, it was based on economic zones. It wasn't exclusively based off of race.
I'm not even willing to argue this with y'all people. It's beneath me. I'm not going to argue.
Fanatic, what do you mean by you people? I get with the racism, dude.
You can say it if you want to. I'm not going to argue with you people about what redlining was. I know redlining was based on race, so this isn't even worth it. It's beneath me. We can move on.
You were brainwashed that it was on race.
Okay.
Next person, please.
Fanatic.
What's your source? Roots.com?
Next person,
Ezekiel, I want to go to Blend.
Quit muting the room, Fanatic.
Hey, next person, please.
All right. I'm just interested how they're going to decide who is. Are they going to have a record of who was descended from slavery exactly? Because I hear a lot of people like.
Oh, you can't mention slavery, or his argument falls apart. He said that at the beginning of the debate.
No, Ezekiel, please.
I hear a lot of people.
So look, here's I
think
I'm about to go ahead and check out anyway, because this is getting actually chaotic, and these people just, he's obviously they're in their feelings, and I understand it. You're used to like just being able to talk over people and gish gallop and not have to actually contend or have your argument.
I miss you being farm equipment. I'll hit them.
You're used to that behavior, and I know this is the first time where somebody's actually like, no. I actually want to engage with what you're saying. So let's do it one at a time. That's what you're encountering, and it's unsettling because now you actually have to contend with the things that are actually being discussed. And I know it doesn't feel comfortable, but trust me, we'll all get to the promised land if you just go ahead and ride past this discomfort and actually engage in the conversation. I know how it feels. It's okay. All right. But we can go to the next person and we'll deal with a single issue. And then that way we can go ahead and make it. And I think this has to probably be the last person. I'll engage with this Chris guy. And then after that, then we'll go ahead and call it for me.
Let's do Chris and then Sense, because Sense has been waiting this whole time too.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Chris and Sense. Go ahead. Go ahead, Chris. You can go first.
Go ahead, Chris.
All right. I was just wondering how. I got a couple of questions. I'll try and get through them quickly. And
I don't want to cut one at a time.
It's not going to be complicated.
It's
not going to be too complicated. I'm just going to say I don't see how you can sort of define who's to benefit from reparations when you've got people. I'll use specific examples of like Joy-Ann Reid and Sonny Hoskins. Sonny Hoskins is descended from slave owners, but she's a woman of color. And if you are successful in getting reparations from like the US government, are you going to then look for reparations from the African nations who sold people in the first place?
Okay, so interesting questions. I appreciate them. So the first thing is, I would say, to answer the last question, and I'll answer the first one. I will not be asking for reparations from the African nations because those people aren't the government to which I belong, right? Like the government is beholden to its people. I am a citizen of the United States. My ancestors built the economic powerhouse that is this country, right? So because of that, then obviously those are the people that I'm going to be asking for the reparations from, or demanding the reparations from, the U.S. government. I don't care about any African nations. Maybe somebody might be able to be able to find some specific harms from them, but that's not going to be my interest. Obviously, my lineage, my foundation starts here in these United States of America. So those are the people who I'm asking for the reparations from, the people who directly harmed me and my ancestors. That's the answer to the first one. And then to the second one, the idea about like, what about people who descended from like slaves or from slave masters, like black people who descended from slave masters, et cetera, et cetera. If you have identified, you and your lineage have identified as black and can test and can trace your lineage specifically to those who have been harmed by policies within this country, then you would be part of this specific lineage-based claim. And so, it's just that simple. And the fact that you might have descended from slave masters doesn't change the fact that you would also have descended from those that were enslaved if you are a black American in this country that can trace your lineage to those harms. So those would be the people that would get it.
And I got one more quick question. Do you think I'll frame this in my own context as well? Because I'm Welsh and I'm from a part of the United Kingdom called Wales. Now the word Welsh translates slave because we was kept as slaves as well also. So, but there's been economic prosperity that's been brought here through the cross-cultural engagement. Do you think that in any way that black people living in America now it's not a very nice way to frame it, but I do think that black people living in America now in any way have benefited from your ancestors being taken in that way? Or would you prefer it if Europeans, and not just Europeans, because Arabic people went there as well and took slaves from it? The reason that there's not a large population of black people in the Arab countries is because those Arabic people used to castrate every single male slave. So you could ask them for reparations also. But do you think that black people black people who live in America today, do you think they've benefited in any way from that practice, or would you prefer it if Europeans and Arabic people had not gone there, and then you would all still be living over there, living in the same conditions as other black people are today?
Okay, another interesting question. Thank you for asking it. So yeah, I would say, without a doubt, there were benefits in being in the most powerful country in the world, but the means by which we obtained those benefits, I think, were absolutely disgusting and awful. So I think Chris Rock said, and I'm not a big fan of his, but he said something that I thought was pretty poignant and a good example. He said, being black in America is like your uncle that paid for your college but molested you when you were 12. It's like, yeah, sure, I'm grateful to be here, but you screwed the hell out of me. Right? And so it's like, yes, we can say, I believe that the average living condition for the average African American, in contrast to plenty of African nations, that we inherit all sorts of privileges. But I think the slavery, the buck breaking, the disgusting, the rape, and all of those things of our ancestors that has led to epigenetic differences, things that we had to inherit. I think all of that.
So would you say those epigenetic differences?
Hold on. I would say that those things that we had to inherit are incredibly disgusting. So I feel like, and maybe I don't think this is your intention.
So would you say you're inheriting a buck breaking fetish?
I feel like, and I don't think this is your intention, I feel like maybe it feels really gross to almost try to speak positively about something so grotesque because of some.
It's just a part of human history, though, Fanatiq.
Because of some unintended benefit, and I don't think that it was your intention to be gross in that way or try to make it seem like slavery was a good thing in any way. But that's how it feels when you try to justify.
Did you complain about inheriting?
Just quickly, Donica, because the Sense is going to speak, and then Fanatiq's got to. I don't know if he's going to stick around or go, but
if I could just,
Chris, sorry, Chris. We're going to have No, so we're going to go to Sense, and then I'm going to have to drop you from co-host, and if you want to stay and have an open discussion, we can, but we can't run a space like this. This is unusual. People are messaging me saying, like, this guy, he just, he can't really have an open discussion. So I will have to.
So yeah, if they're not happy with the discussion, I could have left a long time ago. I'm sorry. I'm not forced to be here, and I'm not trying to ruin your space. So yeah, if they feel like my style of discourse is not acceptable for them, I'm more than happy to leave. Even we can leave. I can leave now. Since, do you really need to talk to me or anything?
I want to hear from Sense, and then I just want to have an open discussion because.
Okay, so we can let Sense go, and then I'll leave.
Okay.
After in my response to him. After my response. Sure. Is that fair? Okay.
No, sounds good.
Okay. Great. Thank you for taking.
But I mean, really, Chris did. I mean, I responded directly to him. He was a respectful person. Why can't we? Why couldn't?
I would like to respond to what you said.
Yeah.
Directly about me.
Yeah, Chris, I want to go to Sense because I want Sense to have a chance to actually address Fanatiq. He's been here the whole time. And then if Fanatiq decides to stick around, he can. I will give you a fair chance to speak, but I just would have to remove you as co-host because I am getting a lot of complaints. But again, I am thankful for you coming, Fanatiq. It has been a decent conversation. We've had a good exchange, I feel. So no hard feelings at all. It's just that this isn't usually how spaces are run. So that's all I'm saying there.
I get it. Y'all just got to learn things the Fanatiq way.